Shalom, shalom, family. This is your brother Obadiah here. This is another day of the Hispanics are Israelites too. If you're sitting there wondering why it's important to know who are Israelites or what's the big idea about the Hispanics being Israelites, please be sure to check out the previous episodes entitled Hispanics are Israelites too. And we go into more in-depth detail why it's important to know who are Israelites. What we're going to do today, we're just going to continue reading more facts from this British scholar who collected all these facts that he was gathering from diaries and books and first-hand accounts from the Spaniards. And these Spaniards recorded all their interactions with the so-called Indians, so-called Hispanics of the New World or New Spain. And what this British scholar winds up coming to the conclusion is that these so-called Hispanics or Indians are actually Hebrew Israelites. He gathered so much research from the Spaniards that were over there for almost 100 years living with these so-called Indians. He says there's too much evidence to show that these so-called Indians are too familiar with the Hebrew customs of circumcision after the 8th day of birth. They know about the Hebrew wearing fringes on their clothes. They know about the flood of Noah days. They have a Sabbath day where they rest. They have feast days where they just rest from work and worship. They don't eat swine. So this British scholar collected all these facts and artifacts and different recollections of first-hand stories, and he put together a book he called The Antiquities of Mexico. And as always, like I did in the previous post, I dropped a link to the site where I'm getting these facts from so you can see it for yourself. So tonight, we're just going to continue with a few more facts that pretty much made the light bulb go off for this scholar to say, hey, these so-called Indians, so-called Mexicans, so-called Peruvians, all these so-called labels that the Spaniards put on our forefathers, these people are indeed Hebrew Israelites underneath. So let's start with the first fact for today. It says, both the Mexicans and the Peruvians were accustomed to take off their sandals whenever they trod upon holy ground or entered the places of their kings. This agreement is an arbitrary custom between two Indian nations so remote from each other would seem to argue a common acquaintance on their part with the history of God's appearing to Moses in the burning bush and commanding him to take off his shoes because the place on which he stood was holy. So this fact here says that the Mexicans and Peruvians, so-called Mexicans and Peruvians, they had a custom where they took off their shoes when they were upon holy ground. And this custom can be traced back to our forefather Moses or Moshe, when the father told him to take off his sandals at the burning bush story. The second fact for tonight, it says, 22nd chapter of Deuteronomy, thou shalt make thee fringes upon the quarters of thy vesture, wherewith thou cover thyself. From the indelible testimony of their own paintings, that was precisely the part of their dress to which the Mexicans fastened fringes. So this fact points to the custom that was given to the Hebrew Israelites in the book of Deuteronomy, where the Most High told our forefathers that I want you to put fringes on the borders of your garments and make sure you have a ribbon of blue around the edge, so when you get into the land, you could look down on the fringe and on the border of blue and remember my covenant, remember to keep my commandments. So he says, you could look at the paintings all in South America, all in Mexico, North America. These so-called Indians, always put fringes on their clothes, on their boots, on their jackets, and on their pants. And even Hollywood records that. When the Hollywood studios became popular and they started making the cowboys and Indian movies, you can see the so-called Indians or the so-called natives, they have fringes all on their garments. Well, these fringes was not for fashion. They were not for show. It was because this was commanded of us by the Most High when we were coming out of the wilderness and we were on our way to the promised land. It's all in the book of Deuteronomy. So this is another clue to awaken our so-called Hispanics that you are not Hispanic. You are a Hebrew Israelite. The third fact for tonight. This is these next two facts is going to be concerning circumcision. It says, with respect to circumcision, Peter Martyr and Gomara, whose veracity as historians has never been doubted, both affirm that the Indians were circumcised. So these two historians, they were Spanish historians. They say they both agree 100% that the Indians, or so-called Indians, were circumcised. And the reason why this is a big clue that our forefathers were the first ones over here in this part of the world is because now in our society, circumcising male children is done for sanitary reasons. I guess years ago, back before I was born, it became a health issue, and they felt that circumcising males gave them less of a chance for disease and bacteria. But in old times, in the 13, 14, 1500s, there was only one group of people who circumcised their males. And they usually circumcised their male on that 8th day after birth. And that was the Hebrew Israelites. That custom of circumcision dates back to our forefather Abram, who had his name changed to Abraham. So the fact that these so-called Indians were practicing circumcision is another clue that they are Hebrew Israelites underneath. So let's continue on with the second point. It says, it deserves to be remarked that the rite of circumcision seems to have prevailed thousands of leagues along the coast of the Atlantic, among nations very remote from each other and who spoke very different languages. Peter Martyr notices the rite of the natives of Yucatan. Ovida says it was practiced in Nicaragua, and Gumilla states it was common among the Indians of the Orinoco, observing that the ceremony was performed on the 8th day after the birth of the child. From the 4th chapter of Dr. Boudinot's Star in the West, that rite was practiced among the North American Indians. So this paragraph just states 3 different scholars who observed our so-called Indian or native forefathers, different tribes who were now remote from each other. They're over here in the South American area, the Caribbean, and also in the North American region. These different tribes had not seen each other, had not spoken, and their languages, although were similar, were of different dialects. But the fact that they were spread out and scattered from each other, but they all still practice circumcision, it causes your bells to go off. How would these people, these so-called Indians, Nicaraguans, and Peruvians, how could they and why would they practice a custom that was only familiar to the Hebrew Israelites? They're way across the Atlantic. They're in the Caribbean islands, South America, scattered all over North America, and they're practicing an ancient custom that was only given to the Hebrew Israelites. These are all clues that well-educated researchers have put together and noticed there's no way that these so-called Hispanics are nothing else but Hebrew Israelites underneath. There's no way you can conclude anything else. They have too many customs that are pretty much identical with the Hebrew Israelites of the Old Testament. Let's move on to our next point for tonight. So this next one is about the flood of Noah's time. So it says, the Peruvians were acquainted with the deluge and believed the rainbow was the sign that the earth would not again be destroyed by water. This is plain from the speech which Mango Capac, the reputed founder of the Peruvian Empire, addressed to his contemporaries on beholding the rainbow rising from a hill. Recorded by Balboa in the 9th chapter of the 3rd part of his Miscellanea Antarctica. So Balboa, another Spaniard, he has a book out there. I think he has 2 or 3 books. Balboa, you can Google him. He took a first-hand account from the founder of the so-called Peruvians, and this king or leader of the Peruvians told them the story that when the rainbow rises, they knew it was the promise from the Most High that he would never flood the world again with water. In the old times, in the old days before Abraham came on the scene, our ancient forefathers referred to the flood as the deluge, Deluge. So the fact that he's using the archaic term deluge to refer to the flood lets you know that he is from ancient Israel. And the fact that he knows the rainbow is a sign of the Most High covenant that still appears to this day in the sky after a summer shower. The fact that this so-called Peruvian knows of this story, this Hebrew story, there's no way he could hold on to a fable that is identical to the Hebrew story in Genesis. There's no way this man could hold on to this or make this story up. All these facts point to the hidden mystery that the so-called Hispanics, so-called natives, so-called Indians, all these new labels we have now, Mexican, Peruvian, Dominican, Puerto Rican, whatever the slave masters put on our ancestors, underneath all this paganism and all these new labels, we are Hebrew Israelites scattered from Israel due to breaking the laws and statutes that were given to us in the Old Testament. If you read Deuteronomy 28, you will see that the Most High warned us that we will be scattered throughout the globe. And our ancestors, so-called natives, so-called Indians, so-called Hispanics, were the first human beings on this side of the globe. Thank you for your time. As always, all praise and honor goes to my Abba, my Heavenly Father, coming in the name of Yahweh Shai, Yahshua, or Jesus Christ to most of you. As I always warn you, as I always beg you, please do not take my word for any of this. Google everything. Google everything twice, 3 times. Do your own research. You can't be lazy. I will drop the link to this article in this post. Till next time, Kwam Yasha'Allah. Rise Israel.